Welcome to Write, Submit, Succeed, a nurse's podcast, where we help nurses turn their expertise into published articles that strengthen nursing practice. I'm Jules.
And I'm Sherry. In every episode, we bring you practical advice from experienced nurse authors and editors to help make publishing feel less intimidating and a lot more achievable. Today, we're thrilled to welcome someone who has helped thousands of nurses become successful authors.
Yes, I'm so excited. Our guest today is Cynthia Saver. She's a nurse, author, editor, educator, and one of the most respected voices in nursing publishing today. Her book, got it right here, Anatomy for Writing for Publication for Nurses, was published as a 5th edition in 2024. And she also gives writing for publication presentations for organizations. We're so excited to have her today because she's going to talk about the article she wrote on avoiding common publication pitfalls, which was published in the July issue of American Nurse Journal. Yay! So today, we are going to dive deeper into what authors can do to improve their chances of success. So Cindy, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yay.
One of the things I appreciated most about your article, Cindy, is that you start by talking about rejection, but not the mechanics of writing, and a bit about the emotions around it, because you do get, I guess you could say you do get a little emotionally attached because it's such a big work, and it's many times from your heart. So why did you feel that this was the best place to begin?
Well, I think as you identified very well, Sherry, rejection can be a really intimidating, distressing experience for authors. You know, as an author, as you said, you invest so much energy and effort and time into this manuscript. It's like your baby. And then you get some people who say, maybe your baby's not perfect. So it can be very difficult. And it can be really hard for novice authors who, I'm afraid, sometimes just give up on getting published when they receive a rejection. And even experienced authors, I think, can get distressed and they give up too soon on a manuscript when it really could have been reworked and resubmitted elsewhere. So I honestly wanted to help authors understand that rejection is just being part of being a writer. It's going to happen. And most importantly, there truly is life after rejection.
That's true. So true. So Cindy, many new authors assume that if a manuscript is rejected, it means they're not a good writer. So as an editor, you've seen the other side of this, though. What would you want every nurse author to understand about rejection?
Well, I think the biggest thing, as I mentioned, is every author gets rejected. And I have a couple examples to illustrate this. Catalin, I want to get their names correct. Catalin Carrico and Drew Weissman received a 2023 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for their work that led to the development of the mRNA vaccines for COVID-19. But here's the interesting piece. Their manuscript was rejected by 2 prestigious journals, Nature and Science, before it was published in Immunity. And then my second example is I once heard Bern Melnick. Now, Bern, you may know, is editor of Worldviews of Evidence-Based Nursing. She spoke many years at a Sigma Theta Tau International Conference. Now, you know, Bern is someone who's not only an editor, she's an extremely prolific writer. Yes. No one would think that she's a bad writer. And what she talked about was when her writing team gets a rejection, they just look at the peer review comments, they rework the manuscript, and resubmit it elsewhere. So you know what? That always stuck with me as just being, matter of fact about it. Here, we're going to look at it, we're going to revise it and move on. So I like to share with authors, particularly new authors, to remember a rejection is not about you as a writer, a nurse, a researcher, a person. It's only about that particular manuscript.
That's so important. Yeah.
Let's talk about what actually leads to manuscript rejection. After decades as an editor, Cindy, what are your top concerns you see over and over again?
Well, I think probably the same thing that you and Jules have seen, and that is manuscripts that do not fit the editorial mission of the journal. Okay. That's the biggest one as far as when a manuscript was first submitted. So, for example, I like to use, okay, American Nurse Journal is a very clinically focused journal, right? So, you're going to focus on that. You're not going to publish a research article on a new nursing theoretical framework. In the same way, nursing research is not going to publish an article on wound care that focuses on how to select the appropriate dressing. So really, you have to understand what the mission of that journal is. And the other thing that happens at that initial rejection stage, and I'm sure, again, you've seen over and over, is that people fail to follow the author guidelines. And really, my kind of spiel on this is that the author guidelines are the policy and procedures for the journal. So in the same way, we have to follow policy and procedures for our organizations, no matter where we work. We have to follow the policy and procedures for the journal. And really, they have great information with the author guidelines. So the author guidelines will tell you the kinds of articles will be published, if they do research, clinical, quality reports, evidence-based practice, the length, what the manuscript should be, the format, the reference style. So it's an excellent resource for authors. I think sometimes they get overlooked. And then I also have seen over the years rejection kind of either at that initial submission or after peer review is that authors try to cover too much territory. And I'm sure you guys have seen that as well.
Yes.
So, as we know, journal articles are not books. Space is limited, even though there's a lot online, it's still limited. So that people have to keep in mind. And I think being too broad, in my mind, often can lead to a very superficial article. So the reader doesn't really come away with like, oh, gee, I understand what I need to do, or I really get the point of this whole article. So that makes it, really different, hard to get your point across. And then I also see manuscripts a lot that aren't well organized. So they're very hard to follow, and that makes it hard for readers. And then it leads to rejection. And finally, a more recent issue is the inappropriate use of artificial intelligence or AI. Now, I think AI can be great for helping you organize your manuscript, maybe creating a content outline. It can be helpful when you want to kind of edit short sections because you're just struggling with it a bit. That's all fine. But it can't be used to create an entire manuscript. The AI tool cannot replicate the critical thinking of a human. So there's always going to be something lacking in those complete manuscripts if you try to do that, let alone the unethical aspect of it. You're not allowed to do that anyway, but ethics. But it's not really a good way to get your message across. It's just not going to be as effective. And as I think you guys have probably seen, it can also put in erroneous information, particularly with references.
Yes.
So that's a big problem. So I think, like I said, that's one that I've seen in more recent years that we didn't have to deal with 10 years ago, right? So it's been kind of interesting. So those are some of the things that I see recurring.
You make some really great points, Cindy. And for our authors, we do ask our authors how they've used AI in the manuscript and attest to that. One point you make in your new article is that many problems are completely preventable.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, of course, author guidelines and follow the author guidelines. Besides that, which mistakes surprise you the most because they're so easy to avoid?
Yeah, I think probably that first one, and that is submitting to the wrong journal, because that is easy to do. And I don't know what that's about. I think maybe sometimes we just get excited and we just submit without thinking it through. So it really is important to take that time and do a little bit of thinking about what is the best fit for this manuscript. As you mentioned, the author guidelines, and I have to say, I don't know how you all feel, but as an editor and an author, I sometimes find author guidelines tedious to wade through. It's not like a novel, right? It's not like a fun read. So I kind of get that. But again, the author guidelines gives you that really specific guidance. So if you follow that, really is going to increase your chances of having your manuscript be accepted. Now, that focusing the article, trying to cover too much territory, it takes a little bit more work, but still can be done. I like to think, I don't know how you approach it, but I like to think when I write an article, okay, what's my goal? And who am I trying to reach? What I want to accomplish, basically. And I put that into a sentence, so I've got it there. So I've got that information. Because again, and think about what do I need to give the reader to accomplish that goal? Again, readers are very busy people. They don't want to have to wade through a bunch of extraneous information to get to your point. So it's really important to keep that in mind. Also to keep in mind that readers want information that they can apply, whether it's in their practice as a nurse, whether it's in their as a professional nurse, whatever it is they want to apply. So if you're doing the article on preventing central venous catheter infections, what specifically should the nurse do? Don't get too theoretical about it and be very practical. And you know what? This is something I struggle with because I love the research part. I love getting all the information. I want to share everything with you. And you really can't do it. It's your job as an author is to identify what is the most important information for readers to know. You have to pick and choose. That's just so crucial. And then I would say to correct the whole organizational issue, an easy way to do that is through a content outline. You know, authors who write a lot, they outline a lot. Because once you have your outline, right, you've got the skeleton of your article. All you're doing is putting flesh on each section. So make your outline detailed. You don't have to use the whole Roman numeral thing. Just basically put your points down. And then you've got it. You can, fill it out, and it makes it so much easier to write. And the other underutilized tool that I see that a lot of authors don't know about are reporting guidelines. So many journals do require you use certain reporting guidelines for articles. For example, for quality improvement articles, a lot of journals require you use Squire guidelines, and that stands for, I'm going to get it correct, Standards for Quality Improvement Reporting Excellence. But here's what I like about the Squire guidelines and any kind of those reporting guidelines. They tell you specifically what should go in each section of the manuscript. And I see Jules and Sherry nodding their heads because it's so true. And then they put a checklist at the end. So you've got everything there. So for some reason, your journal doesn't require those guidelines, you can still use them to help you organize. So it just makes it kind of a no-brainer. And I did want to mention, and maybe it can go in the show notes, is that if you're looking for guidelines, there's a website called the Equator Network that is kind of a repository for all those guidelines. So that's something that can be helpful. And I should mention too, if you are not sure about the journal, if it's a good fit, you want to read the journal, there's resources for that too that you can look at to find additional resources. There's a directory of nursing journals that you can use.
That is some great information, Cindy. That's amazing. So another thing that I feel like you and I both probably experienced is receiving manuscripts that simply aren't written for the journal to which you've submitted, like we just talked about. So tell me why selecting the right journal is such an important first step, and what homework specifically authors can take. Like, what steps can they take before they even submit anything?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Again, the key thing is why you want to take time doing it is it really picking the wrong journal is like your article is just going to get rejected. Case closed. You got nowhere to go after that with that particular journal. So the homework you can do is, of course, read the journal, read several past issues, look at the table of contents, try to determine if it's a good fit. So how do you do that? How do you determine it's a good fit? Check out who the journal is targeting as far as readership. So I like to use the example, maybe you have this research study you did on leadership styles of chief nurse executives. Great research, but it's not going to go well with American Nurse Journal because it's a clinically focused a journal. You would really want to look at more of a leadership kind of journal. So, so you really want to think about who is my target audience and does the journal reach that target audience? That's kind of the key point. The other thing is matching, what I call matching article type, in that does the journal publish quality improvement reports? Does it publish, for example, evidence-based improvement projects? For example, maybe you have a wonderful case study, but the author guidelines and doesn't mention anything about case studies. When you review past issues of the journal, you don't see any case studies. Well, that should tell you the journal is probably not going to start with your case study, no matter, even if it's stellar. So you really want to kind of look at that. So again, I kind of just emphasize, start with the ones you read on a regular basis. I know that sounds like common sense, but I think sometimes people overlook it because you can get a sense of the format, the tone, whether it's formal or informal. You can do all those kinds of things. If you have to go further afield, as I mentioned, there's a directory of nursing journals that you can access. And what's nice about that is it's put together by the International Academy of Nurse Editors, so the journals are legitimate. So it gives you like a short overview and goes on and gives you a link to the journal. Of course, we want everything appropriate to be in the American Nurse Journal, but sometimes you do have to go a little further afield for that. And then the other piece of homework I think often gets neglected is to send a query. So a query email, now not all editors accept queries, as we know, but a query email is a great way to see if the editor is even interested in your topic. So it consists of that brief email to the journal, and I'm sure Jules and Sherry, you'll agree, being on the receiving end of many of these, it should be succinct. It should be like, here's kind of basically what the article is going to cover. Here's basically why I should be the one to write the article. So just be short. Do not put it an attachment, because it could end up in spam. And plus, it's supposed to be short, so it's just suitable to an email. And you can find who to send a query to, of course, in the inevitable author guidelines. And so the reason one query, again, you don't want to waste your time. Maybe the editor decides, gee, I'm not interested in this topic. I have something coming up on it similar, so you don't have to waste your time writing the article. You can move on to the next journal, because again, you have to be sure your manuscript fits with that journal. So again, you don't want to be writing everything and then send it off and it gets rejected. So I think all those things can be really helpful ahead of time before you submit the manuscript to reduce the chances you'll experience a rejection.
That's great advice.
Yes, you make some great points there, Cindy. And I think it's interesting, you mentioned the detailed outline that the author uses as they're writing the manuscript to keep them focused. But then the outline for the query letter is brief and more concise. So that's really some good points there. So let's talk about peer review. Authors sometimes receive comments from peer reviewers who think that the manuscript should be revised. Sometimes it can seem overwhelming or even contradictory. And what's the difference between reading reviewers' comments emotionally versus reading them as I like to see them as an opportunity to strengthen the manuscript?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've heard that people say, look on peer review comments as a gift. That might be stretching it. And that initial reaction, right, is like, gift. So sometimes you do have to kind of set it aside a bit and let the emotions settle. And what always helps me, and I share with others, is I try to have the mindset that everyone who touches my manuscript, whether it's me, obviously, the editorial staff at the journal, or their peer reviewers, they really have one goal in mind, and that's to make the article the best possible article can be, so that it'll get read. And that's what you want. You want the article to be read. So I think that mindset can help take some of the edge off that distress that people often feel. And I recommend, if you do need to take a break, that's fine. But when you come back, read the comments, consider them objectively, and look at, as you said, Sherry, what can I take away here that will strengthen the manuscript? Something I think new authors don't always get is you don't have to take every single suggestion. You're the author, but you do need to show the editor you considered it. So whether you do a table, like here's a comment, here's what I did, or here's why I didn't do it, or in the cover letter, if you didn't address something, you do need to let the editor know, because otherwise we don't know that something was even addressed. When things are unclear or contradictory, when things are contradictory, one thing I always look at is the clarity of that section. Is the section clear enough, or was there room for misinterpretation by two different people? So that's the first place I look. And then you do at some point have to make a decision. Again, you are the author, and so who are you going to, comments are you going to take? So you have the responsibility to make that. It does come, your name's on the article, so you have to think about that. But do have a good reason why you aren't taking the other one. And a lot of editors, not all editors, but a lot of editors, if you're really kind of stuck and a little confused, you can sometimes try contacting the editor to see if they can help you work through the process. And again, not all editors will do that, but it's something to consider. But a lot of times, just sort of looking at that can be helpful. Just be thinking about the clarity of what you've written. And then the other thing I keep in mind is that if you receive the manuscript back after peer review and you're asked to revise and resubmit, it actually should be a cause for celebration because, as you guys know, if you revise it and resubmit it, there's a really good chance it's going to be accepted for publication. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And even if you do get the rejection at that point, it is likely that you can take something away from that. You can look at, as you said, Sherry, points that you can use to strengthen your manuscript, because then you can revise it and resubmit it elsewhere. I do like to always emphasize you do need to look at your manuscript, make sure revise it also to fit that new journal. You can't just say, oh, it got rejected, I'm going to slap a new cover email on it and send it off. You do have to do some work on that. But again, you can use, as Byrne mentioned all those years ago, some of those things can be helpful to strengthen your manuscript. So those are some of the things to think about. But I know reading peer review comments can be hard. There's no doubt about it. I think we all experience that.
Yeah, you make some great points again, Cindy. And I learned this lesson early in my career. I was in graduate school, and I had my thesis completed, and I changed it to a format and submitted it to critical care nurse. And they sent back a request for rework. Little did I know that that was good news. And I was frustrated. And, I had been working on that thesis for many semesters. And I just, gave up, and I didn't, look at that request for revision again for quite a long time. But what I know now is that I should have indeed done the rework, because they sent it for peer review. They liked the topic, but they were making some suggestions. So I think this knowledge is really important, because I know in the case with Jules and myself, 95% of our manuscripts that are published we do ask for rework, and it might be minor reworks as well. So keep that in mind as a nurse author.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Sherry. Like, no one comes in, I think as a new author, you think, oh, it's like, I thought the manuscript was perfect or whatever. Nobody gets it's very rare for a manuscript you submit and it's like, okay, this is great, we're publishing it. No revisions or anything needed. So I think that's an excellent point. It's often you have to make revisions, more often than not, far more often than not. So don't think that that's unusual. I think that's excellent. And I have to share my own experience. I similarly had a manuscript I thought this was a great manuscript about the clinical trials process early in my career, and I came back rejected, and I just thought, oh, okay, I'll let it go. But then I thought, no, now I think about it, I should dig that thing out. No, be persistent.
Yeah. That almost speaks to the relationship between authors and editors. So I love reminding authors that, as an editor, I want your manuscript. Yes. I want to be able to publish it. I want you to succeed. So Cindy, maybe you could just touch real quickly on, talk about the partnership maybe between authors and editors.
Yeah, I think I'm so glad you brought that up, Jules, because I do think sometimes authors, particularly new authors, view editors as obstacles as opposed to partners that can help them.
Yeah.
As we know, editors are the reader's advocate. It's our job to be sure that we publish high quality articles that readers can benefit. But as you said, we look to authors to help us meet that goal. We're not out there writing all these articles. And I always say one of the best kept secrets about publishing is that journals need authors. And so, you may not be your top choice, but it may be your second choice to get published. So, as you mentioned, we want authors to succeed. And I think every editor I've known has pointed out that working with authors is really one of the best rewards of the position of being editor, particularly novice authors. I mean, we enjoy I see you guys nodding. We enjoy helping people succeed
Yeah.
in their publication journey. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. And so to try to view that author-editor partnership as a positive. It
Yeah.
benefits editors and it benefits authors as well. I've learned so much. Honestly, I've learned so much from people editing my work over the years or helping
Yeah.
me, rework things. You can learn so much from editors. So I hope people will take that away and think of it, as you said, more of a partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I think that's great. It is a partnership. Of course, we want all authors to succeed. So on that note, what's one piece of encouragement you'd give to nurses who have been thinking about writing, but they just haven't gotten started yet, and they might need some motivation to, get words on paper?
Okay, well, here's my big tip here, is you have to treat it like a project, and treat it like any other project. So you have to establish a deadline as to when you want to submit the manuscript. If there's no deadline, it's never going to happen, right? So that's the first thing. You have to establish a deadline, and then you work backwards. Okay, I want to submit by this date. So when do I need to have my research done? When do I want to have my content outline done? Just some little key points that you have. And then the second biggest thing is you have to schedule the writing time in your calendar. Okay. Now it doesn't have to be a whole day. In fact, for most of us, that would be, pretty difficult. It's usually better for most people to schedule shorter amount of times more frequently. So if you can grab an hour here, and even if you have a half hour, you can get a lot done in a half hour. And that's why it's so important to have that outline, right? Because if you only have an hour or a half hour, you can just take a little section of that outline and work that up. Because that, I should mention, is, I'm sure you guys would agree, as a myth, is that you have to start from the beginning of the article to the end. No, you can
No.
write different sections, so that's why having an outline helps with that. And honestly, for most people, it's better to write the beginning intro at the end when you really have a good flavor of the article and make it more powerful. So you do want to schedule that time in your calendar. And here's the second point, which is probably even more important. You have to respect that time. You can't be just treat it like it's a meeting with your supervisor or something else that you cannot miss. Otherwise, it's kind of like, oh, someone said, oh, can you help me with this, whatever. I said, oh, I can move my writing time to another day. No, that is your dedicated time. You have to protect it. So it's really important. And I would also say, to help get started, is sometimes people will sit down at the computer, and even starting with the outline can be hard. So I always say, think before you write. So, if I'm out walking, doing my morning walk, or waiting in line, sometimes I'm thinking about an article. Even it might be an article in process, it might be an article I'm thinking about. And what's nice is now we have our phones, so we can take little notes or make notes to ourselves so we can access after. So that's important to do as well. So I think those things, treating it like a project, establishing a deadline. And I will say, the very first article I got published, I was part of a writing team. So writing teams are more common. So if you can hook up with the right people and establish guidelines up front, who's going to do what, and what will you do if someone's not participating fully, all that. But that can take some of the intimidation out of it. So if you have a writing team where at least one person's been published, they can kind of mentor you a bit with that. And of course, I can't leave out, follow the author guidelines.
Yes, please follow the author guidelines. For sure. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for joining us today. Your advice reminds us that, publication isn't just about perfection. It's about preparation, persistence. It's about, learning through the process. You talked us through all that. So once again, Cindy's book is Anatomy of Writing for Publication for Nurses, 5th edition. It's published by Sigma Theta Tau International. And I have to admit that first edition of your book is what got me published for the first time
That's nice to
amongst
hear.
my peers. So, yay. Quick disclosure on the book, Sherry also has a chapter in the book, and that one's called Writing the Clinical Article. So very helpful for all the nurses listening today. Go find that chapter in the book. You can find more great advice from Cindy online at the Writing Mind blog. We'll put that link in our show notes. And of course, read her article in the July issue. It's called Get Published, Promote Publication Success by Avoiding Pitfalls. So, and remember, this is so important. If you've experienced rejection, if you're worried about submitting your first manuscript, we hope that today's conversation gives you confidence to move forward, because every published author started with a first submission. And if you have any questions, if you need help, reach out. I'm happy to help. I know not all editors are approachable, but that's what we're here for. I can help you talk about topics. I can help you focus in. I can tell you what's wrong and you can fix it and resubmit it to me. I do it all the time. So please reach out if you have any questions.
Great points there, Jules. And yes, we look forward to your queries, your questions. If you've enjoyed the episode today, please be sure to join us for future episodes of Write, Submit, Succeed, a nurse's podcast, and share it with colleagues who've been thinking about writing for publication. You can find our information at myamericannurse.com/write. We have a webpage, and we invite you to also send us your questions. And we do cover audience questions in future episodes. So please send those along. And until next time, thank you for joining us for Write, Submit, Succeed. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Cindy.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks for having
Cindy.
me.